Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me from all the way over in Utah, big round of applause for my host companion and yours, Sujin Sarowick. Sujin?
Hey, Dev. You made it sound like that's not usually the case for us.
I know. Well, I don't know. I have a weird energy today.
We are out of sorts.
We. A bit out of sorts. I drank too much water.
No. Drinking problem, I see. All
Yeah,
right.
a little bit. I got like a gas bubble. It's gonna come out during the show, and I apologize in advance. That's what I have to say.
Be prepared for that. Oh, man.
But yeah, but other than that, it's the Say
Speaking
Report.
of weird energies and gas bubbles, Dev.
Yeah.
Da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na-na.
Da-da-da-da-da-da. Ghostbusters!
Caught me right in the middle of the second book.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. Before we talk about that, though, because
No.
we have to talk about...
We have to talk about some Ghostbusters.
We have to talk about a, end-of-the-world scenario that happened in 1984 in New York. We have the documentation, but before that, it is the last show of April, which means some important things for listeners of the Say Report, both new and old. If you haven't picked up on it yet, every even month of the year, we do a very special episode. So that means that there is going to be another April episode, and that's going to be our very special episode on Dracula 2000. So we just want to drum up a little bit of excitement for Dracula 2000.
The Easter classic.
The Easter classic Dracula 2000. So that's going to drop on Thursday. It always drops the last Thursday, which just happens to be the last day of April this time around. So that's cool. I think that might be the first time that's ever actually happened in the time.
It's also
going to
be stimulus day for me. I'm finally getting me my stimulus check.
It's going to be a big day for Season too. But regarding this very special episode, we've been doing them for 4 years now. Ever since we started way back with Coyote Ugly, which if you haven't listened to, definitely listen to it. Because it's awesome. That Coyote Ugly episode is probably one of my favorite things that we've ever done. I'm just going to, pat my own back a little bit before we go a little further. But
all right,
we've been doing these for a while. It's the fourth year. It's going to be the fourth anniversary of the start of these. And I'd like to turn it to you, the listeners. Just if you have any questions about Dracula 2000, we have nothing to do with the movie, as far as I know, right? Did you have anything to do with Dracula 2000?
Well, hey, that's for me to reveal on Thursday. But yeah, man, we don't tend to do movies we've had any involvement in.
I once had an idea for a movie that had a main character named Simon, but that once my Demolition Man claim got thrown out, I decided to stop trying to pursue any legal action for that. But we don't have anything to do with the creative process of Dracula 2000. But if you have any questions regarding Dracula 2000, send them to us at the Say Report on Twitter or to the sayreport@gmail.com. And your questions can be answered in our very special episode on Dracula 2000.
The creative side of Dracula 2000, but I feel like we are pretty heavily weighted on the consumption side of Dracula 2000.
Even then, it's you get to hear an answer filtered through our experiences and our personal philosophy. Yeah. And that's cool. But I'd really like to hear if you've seen the movie, even if you haven't seen it recently, or if you decided to rewatch it in anticipation, send us your questions to @thesayreport on Twitter or thesayreport@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. The second thing, and I'm sorry, Season, I just wanted to make sure we got all this in at the beginning of the episode, is that means that our next full episode, our next proper episode, is going to take place in the greatest month of the year. And that is Brendan Fraser History Month.
Yes, it is. Everybody, say your prayers. Give yourself your blessing.
Thank Brendan Fraser in the name of
for all that he has given us.
The Son-in-Law, and the Jury Duty. Though he's only in... No, those are the three he's in, right? No, it's In the Army Now that he shows up as the same character. So be ready for Brendan Fraser History Month, because we're going to do a lot of talking about Brendan Fraser. And just to get a jump on that, if you want to follow along with us, we're going to be looking at Journey to the Mysterious Island, what I think might be the greatest title ever.
But wait, Devin.
Yes?
Brendan Fraser's not in that one.
No, Brendan Fraser isn't in that. And you know what? That kicks off an interesting trend in the career of Brendan Fraser. Sequels that don't feature one of the greatest actors we were ever gifted.
So we're going to talk about severe absence of Brendan Fraser this year in all of the sequels to movies that he should have been in.
And we're kicking it off with Journey to the Mysterious Island, because we kind of finished before Doom Patrol on Journey to the Center of the Earth. But we'll make sure to actually look at the Brendan Fraser movies in addition to the sequels that didn't feature him, so that you get a full cornucopic picture. It's going to be a fun month.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Yeah. I'm very excited.
But now that we've got all that housekeeping out of the way...
Yeah! So long, business. Time for jokes. Let's talk about Ghostbusters.
Let's talk about Ghostbusters, the novelization.
Yeah, surprise. We're not talking about the movies, guys.
Written by Richard Mueller, wrote the first one, right?
Yeah, I got the book right here. So Richard Mueller wrote the first one, and then Ed Naha wrote the novelization of Ghostbusters 2. Yeah, man. So about a month ago, not even, about 2 weeks ago, you contacted me and were like, if I could get a copy of the novelization of Ghostbusters in your hand, would you be willing to read it? And I instantly was like, yes. And lo and behold, a few days later, what showed up on my doorstep was this wonderful collection. First of all, this is a hell of a good reprint, because I have to imagine when they originally came out, they were not together like this, right? Like they were separate novels, right? I kind of want to see if I can find the separate ones too.
Yeah, this goes back very far for me. This goes back to, I want to say, easily 2015. Where I found out that these novelizations of the two movies existed. But
as they often did back then. They would take these, especially if they were family hits, they could throw them into some really easy to read, quick what do you call it? Airplane novels, like beach reads, right?
Yeah, exactly. And oh man, I can't watch a movie, but I'll read the book of the movie, and that'll satiate it for me. It's weird. Very, very often we hear I'll wait for the movie, but on these it's I'll wait for the book.
Well, you have to think of it this way, right? We're talking about a time in history when VHS tapes could cost upwards of $90 for the movie, right?
Very true.
Like in all seriousness, that's why these kinds of things exist. The best example of this is Marvel doing all of the Star Wars movies and stuff, and it's why Marvel has had first dibs on the Star Wars comics, is because they needed to get those into kids' hands somehow, and they weren't always going to be able to afford VHS tapes. So novelizations of movies is not a new thing by any stretch, but man, it is its own little niche for sure.
But the step beyond, and what really got me looking for these in particular, was I found at a Savers the novelization of Jaws the Revenge, the best sequel to Jaws. Come fight me, I don't care. And in the novelization of Jaws the Revenge,
That's the one with Michael
Caine, yeah.
Michael Caine,
and
right?
Mario Van Peebles.
Yes,
just for the hell of it, right? Let's just throw his name out there. And the novelization of that book is a completely different journey, because it's based on the original script. And in the original script of Jaws the Revenge, the shark is literally voodoo magicked to hunt them down. I kid you not. That's
so good. That's the kind of shit you get from movie novelizations that is so choice, though. When you can tell that it was written 6 months before the final edit of the script, and so there's all of this weird stuff, characters that show up, lines that aren't quite right. I mean, there's some choice moments in the Ghostbusters novels that are not quite what you remember from the movies, but I gotta say, I love that kind of shit. Reading alternate reality versions of movies, essentially.
Exactly, and for a long time, it was the way to get deleted scenes, which is something we'll touch on real big with Ghostbusters novelization. But I searched and searched. I was going to used bookstores up and down the East Coast trying to find copies of these novelizations, and I couldn't. And then I heard that this was coming, and I set an alert to remind me when it came out. Now, I heard this 5 years ago, and I got that alert on April 10th. I ordered it and it arrived the next day.
Nice.
And I was super happy.
Especially,
Man,
sorry, you mentioned the deleted scenes thing, and I'm just thinking like nothing is better than getting an entire deleted movie like you get in like Good Burger to Go.
Yes, right, exactly. This isn't a new thing that we've talked about Good Burger to Go many times. So this seemed kind of right in our wheelhouse to discuss this. Especially since we talked about High Fidelity earlier, and the greatest deleted scene from High Fidelity, the film, is present in the book. And that's so it's beautiful. It's all this stuff. But I think that's all the table setting that we need to do to talk about Ghostbusters the novelization by Richard Mueller. And we'll talk about Ghostbusters 2, even though you're only halfway through it. Now, when you say halfway through it, before we get to it, does that mean you're in the second part?
They're in the courtroom scene, so
okay.
it's literally like when shit starts to kick off. So like I keep on calling him Vandross. That's not his name. What's his name? The squirrely guy. He's already been possessed. He's already wandering around with like his eyes aglow and stuff
Janos.
like that. Yeah, Janos. Thank you. Not Vandross. Yeah. So I'm deep into it, but there is still a good like maybe 2/3 of the book left for me.
The craziest part about that book is about to happen for you, and
nice.
It is at the end of that chapter. And I can't wait for when you finish that chapter and you go, oh my God. Because oh my God.
I mean, the courtroom scene in Ghostbusters 2 is like when people talk about Ghostbusters, that is the scene that is burned into my mind with like the two in the movie, the two floating ghosts in the electric chairs, like floating around the courtroom, right? Like that. When I was a kid, that was the scene that made an impression on me. And so like whenever I think about Ghostbusters and everybody talks about like the effects, everybody talks about like the comedy, the humor, like I think about Rick Moranis doing his best lawyering in that scene that he possibly can, despite the fact he's just awful. Oh, Lewis.
Lewis Tully is the worst.
Yeah. Yeah, like that is a quintessential scene for me when people talk about Ghostbusters. So I'm excited. I'm excited.
And also not just because it is a quintessential scene in the film, but it was the marketing for Ghostbusters 2. That scene is pretty much where all of the trailer for Ghostbusters 2 is ripped from. And it has, I want to say 3 of the most quoted moments in the Ghostbusters like pantheon occur in it. Do, Ray, Egon, 2 in the box ready to go, we be fast and they be slow. And Scolari, brother.
Yeah, there's something Viewmaster, that's what it was. I was like, there's something that is really sticking in my head and I can't quite put my finger on it, but I just realized what it is. I had the Viewmaster slides for Ghostbusters 2, not 1, just Ghostbusters 2, and it is one of the scenes in that, and I remember like that, like flicking over to that scene and being like legitimately scared at like these like creepy ass like ghost puppet things that they had. Man, yeah. So it's wild. Like it's really wild getting to read these things and remember these movies in a way that I haven't in a while now,
Yeah. And it divorces you from what you know in a way. Like the Peter Venkman in my head is not necessarily Bill Murray. And that's interesting.
Yeah, I have to say that comes into play even more when they're talking about the difference between Egon and Ray, because not more than once they talk about Ray being the tall Ghostbuster. And even in the second book, like they talk about Ray being the tall, lanky one, and it's weird because like that's not what I think about when I think about that like setup between the two of them.
Right, which also in addition to that, they talk about Egon like he's a hulking mass of a man.
Right. Yeah.
Like because there's a moment where he loses his temper and it silences everybody.
Yeah, like he like screams at the end of the first book, and like it silences the city of New York.
And it's like, yeah, because he's got to be a big guy based on how they've described him. They also call him wild earlier on in the second book. But let's talk about like this is enough place setting. Let's talk about the first book.
Okay.
And let's start with 2 characters.
Yep.
Who you have the book there. I don't have my copy, unfortunately, because I lent it out to somebody. I did reread the first book today for this. So I've read the novelization of Ghostbusters twice in my life. and I couldn't be happier with that. But could you give their official names? Are you able to get that right there?
What, like their like full names?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have Ray Stantz.
No,
You
no,
have
no, not the Ghostbusters. The
okay.
characters that we're introduced to in the very beginning of the movie.
Oh,
A former
yes.
jockey and a
Yeah, hold
inspirational
on. I can't.
singer.
The two. I'm not gonna spoil it. Hold on. I got this here. So one of them is Harlan Bojay, and the other is Robert Learned Coombs.
Yes.
That deserves a two syllable learned
It is
in that
learned.
name.
That's how I
Yeah.
read it every time. So Robert and Harlan, and when the book opens up and you're introduced to two homeless men.
That are not in the movie. But okay, go ahead, because I have a question about them. But go ahead.
Yes. And they're sort of these. They're not like a Greek chorus, but they're enough.
Kind of a Greek chorus.
They're kind of the narrators of Ghostbusters.
They're. It's weird because they're not there the whole time. They don't pop up and give you any useful information, but they're happy to get. They're the Statler and Waldorf of this story. Is really what they are.
Right. And so, do you know what those characters were initially conceived to be in the script?
So they have to be the two guys from Trading Places. That's what I kept thinking of.
Right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
they show up in Coming to America and all of that.
And then they show up in Coming to America and all that, right? So like that is where my mind was going the whole time. But like, are they in the movie? Like, do they warp into somebody else in the movie?
No, they don't. They don't happen at all in the movie, as far as I know. Scenes were shot because they were revealed in the 35th anniversary DVD, which was like $100, and I didn't buy. I'm sorry, I'm a fan, but I spent $300 on a Lego Ghostbuster Firehouse. That was kind of my Ghostbuster limit. I'm gonna be straight with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Everybody has to know where their line is, man.
They were initially conceived to be played by Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. It was going to be a dual role with them as those two homeless men.
In what artistic endeavor? What layer does that bring to the story?
I don't know. But like that's one of those things where I've heard that rumor and I've read about it enough times that it wasn't a total slap to the face when they showed up as characters, but it was interesting to be like, I totally understand why they eliminated that from the film.
Well,
I totally
because you only ever see them when the other Ghostbusters are around, right? Like there's maybe one or two moments where those two show up where the Ghostbusters are not also there. Because like you talk about the library in the beginning, and like we see them still at the library when the Ghostbusters come in later, and they actually interact with them.
Yeah. So it would have been weird.
Weird.
But with that in mind, I was trying to figure out which would be playing which character.
Mm.
And that I'm still not convinced who. Like, I'm fairly certain that Harlan would have been played by Dan Aykroyd.
I was going to say Harlan for Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's one scene in particular that sells that for me. Later on in the book, there's a moment when there's just Harlan walking down the street, and it's when the building first starts to kind of collapse, and he gets hit with a piece of stonework off the top of the building. And it would involve a lot of facial humor, let me put it that way.
Yes.
And that is something that Dan Aykroyd, especially at the time, was very good at. Face acting is very much his cup of tea. You give Bill Murray a script and he can run fucking wild, but you want somebody that's going to give you good like physical comedy, and that's when you get somebody like Dan Aykroyd involved.
I agree. It's also the description of Harlan was a former jockey who at 24 put on 45 pounds and grew 4 inches. That I'm like, so that's Dan Aykroyd. Of the two of them.
Yeah.
I just see that. And, you know, the whole Richard Leonard Combs storyline of he wanted to be a singer, he was charismatic, he was everything, he just couldn't sing. I'm like, I could see Bill Murray playing that character as opposed to Elwood Blues.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh man, yeah, wild. Like this whole set of characters that we've never even really known about before is introduced in this to me.
Which is like even Alice, I can't think of the character, Alice Melvin, the librarian. She is described completely different from the character who appears in the film.
Oh, I mean, you learn so much about this character that only shows up in this first scene.
Yeah, like he took the time to really develop the characters of almost everybody who interacts with a ghost.
Yeah.
And I dig that because that's the kind of stuff that you need in a novelization.
The couple in Sedgwick is such a good moment because, like, you know, in the movie they get the call, they go to the Sedgwick, and you remember all of the stuff between them and what would eventually become Slimer. Although, what is he called in the movies? He's called something specific in the Onion Head. Is that what it is? And so there's this that is all great, but this like weird like creation of him in that moment where like he comes out of the vents and this couple on their honeymoon is like having like this terrible night, and it actually feeds into a lot of what ends up happening in the second book, this idea that like these ghosts start to appear basically around people like kind of doing like psychically upsetting things, really, right? Like,
yeah.
Like it leads a lot. It lends a lot more to the credence of what happening in 2 is actually very much connected to 1 in a way that I've never considered before.
I agree, because there's this moment even in the video game that came out in 2009 where they're like, it's all connected. The stuff at, you know, Dana Barrett's apartment building, the River of Slime, it's all Ivo Shandor. And I didn't believe that. It felt like a retcon at the time, but then reading these 2 novels, like one right after another, and seeing it, I'm like, oh no, like they kind of built it into that first novel that these ghosts existed as sort of a formless vapor, and then they took on the characteristics of what was going on around them.
Yeah, and there's like this weird sense that like that the psychic energy of New York is responsible for a lot of the bad juju, right? And that fits right in line with that like late 80s, early 90s attitude of like the New York asshole, right? And it's something that sticks around now as a character to these days, even though we've kind of, you know, expanded our understanding that like people in certain places can have all sorts of different personalities. There's something special about like the New York asshole that sticks around, right? And so the fact that the city is just like kind of just negatively charging the psychic energies is pretty stock standard in both of these books. Like it's pretty deeply rooted in both of these books.
Yeah, I like it. I dig it a lot. But what I think I dig more, speaking of character development, is that I've never understood the Ghostbusters better than I do after reading these novels. More the first one than the second one. If I had a preference, I'd say the first novel is better, but I don't want to ruin anything for you in that second novel since you're only about a third of the way through.
It's the same. I mean, it's the same way with the movies, though, right? As the first one, with all of the setup and the building of the world, is just so much more surprising, and the fact that there's never been anything like it before really lends it a hand, and it becomes an essential film, right? And whereas the second one catches a lot of slack for being like, oh, they're just doing a lot of the same things, a lot of the same jokes, a lot of the same like visual effects and moments and stuff like that. It's sequelitis all the way through, right? But that's because there's nothing surprising anymore. There's no sense of discovery. So like it doesn't surprise me to hear that the first one probably comes across as the better of the 2 stories, because it's very rare that you find the sequel to be the thing that really kind of grabs you.
Right. I also think it's because Richard Mueller is a better writer.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
I don't think either of them is a particularly strong writer, but from what I've read so far, I can definitely agree with that. But that's the other thing about these movie novelizations, and this is through and through, is that you don't have top-notch writers writing these things. You know what I mean? You have these guys that are working and just trying to pump something out to survive. This is not their bread and butter. This is not their baby. You don't have the guy out there that's dreaming of sitting down to write the novelization of a script for a movie that he's probably not even like seen yet, right? Because the odds are the script has landed in his lap 6 months before the movies come out. So like they don't even know if it's even going to be like a successful movie. But here they are writing this script, this novelization version of it, just hoping that like if the movie hits big, I'll make some big bucks on this. But really, it's not up to my writing to make that happen, you know?
Yes.
But yeah, I can definitely see that the first book is a little bit more well written.
Which is, I don't know if that's, I don't know. I just think he's a better writer. There's more to it. But what I really like, and there's something that you said that struck me, and that's they hate Peter Venkman.
Yes, I would. Yeah, okay. Off mic. I thought you meant just now.
No.
there's definitely this weird sense in the beginning of the book that none of the core group there of the three of them, right? Like I think Dana Barrett has actually, like, I think there's a lot of concern and care put into the creation of Dana Barrett's character. And as much as you were joking about like Louis Tully being kind of the worst, he is kind of built up in a very specific way. And I think that there is a weird, like, you do kind of like him by the end of that movie, by the end of that first book, right? And it's why when he shows up in the second one, you're happy to see him again when he shows up again. The same goes for Janine, right? But man, the way that they treat Venkman and Stantz and Spangler is just like is cruel almost in the first like half of that book, because they're really, and it's not them. I should say it's Mueller, right? Because I don't think the movie does this. Mueller really kind of pushes this point that like they couldn't be doing anything else. They really couldn't be. Who Venkman is, he needs to be this. I mean, he is a literal carny in these novels, right? Yes. Like he needs to be this carnival barker that is leading the charge with these three. And like Stantz kind of is aimless without somebody to like guide him, and so he needs a Venkman in his life, and it kind of makes him a little bit of a cop out on a lot of things, like the way that they describe Stantz's family and the way that he interacts with the rest of his family. He feels like a little bit of a coward sometimes, you know. And then Spangler is just like something else, like the like detached like weirdo that they turn him into, and it's not like it doesn't fit with what you see in the movie, but the way that the depths at which they go to make Spangler this completely like unlikable human. And even in the beginning of the second novel, as I'm reading now, the stuff that he's doing with like the experimenting on people and now working in the college setting, it's almost despicable, right? But Venkman in particular, I took issue with.
Right, because he's sort of, I feel like most people probably dig Peter Venkman. Not, if he's not your favorite, he's your second favorite. I think it's Michelangelo syndrome, where Michelangelo might not be your favorite turtle, but he's definitely going to be your second favorite turtle.
Everybody loves Mikey.
Yeah, and I think, and that's one of those things where like Peter Venkman's the same thing. And for a long time, he was my favorite, but then like as I grew and invested in these characters, I actually really started to have a lot of affection for Winston Zeddemore, who we haven't discussed yet at all.
Well, that's because the book nor the movie do for about 45 minutes. So
yeah, he's. I mean, I imagine that had it been Eddie Murphy in that role, the way that they had originally intended, he would have shown up right at the beginning, and it would have been 4 down and out scientists, not the way that it turned out. It's weird. Ghostbusters is such a weird property, like all around.
Well, it's hard to talk about Winston and not talk about some of the inherent issues that come hand in hand with, I mean, let's face it. I mean, like we're talking about, it was Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd that wrote the first one, right? Am I getting that right?
They wrote all three.
Right.
All three being the video game as well, which is considered the canon sequel. Sorry.
No, that's it. Yeah, I mean, like the inherent issues, the problematic issues that come along with their writing. And, you know, somebody like Harold Ramis, who continued to write throughout his career, you can really kind of see a growth in that way, in the way in which he treats women, in the way in which he treats others in general, right? So, like, there is something super problematic with this character in this first movie, with Winston Zeddemore in this first movie. The fact that he feels like he's just kind of token, right? Like, there's no more emblematic character, I think, in movie history of the token black character than Winston Zeddemore sometimes, right? Like they felt like they were like, oh, there's a lot of white people in this movie. We have to get somebody in here. I mean, we are talking about New York after all, right? And so there's this weird like feeling that he's kind of just plugged in the movie. And in the book, they kind of go even further with that. Like the way that Mueller writes him with like this like angry mom who's like pushing him to go get a job, which is like a weird like, on the one hand, we're told that he's a decorated soldier, like war veteran, right? But on the other hand, we're also being told that he's like this lazy, like 30-year-old living with his parents still, and like that's a real weird, treatment for this character, especially at the end of the 80s. You know, it's not like now where every 30-year-old is still living with their parents. Like this is something that like it really kind of says something about this character in particular, that's his lot in life, right? And
I mean, I mean, we're going to continue down this road, but it also says something that like he got out of the service and it's been a month. It's not like he's been a shiftless lie about for years,
Right,
or even
right.
6 months, is one of these, all right, you've been home for a month, get a job.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, and so that in some ways is better than the alternative, but
yeah.
man, it does feel kind of
Yeah, you're not wrong.
gross.
It does. Well, nothing feels grosser than in the book when Ray Stantz meets him, and
Yep.
the way that Mueller decides, we're going to tell you who Winston Zeddemore is you're black.
Yeah, and then some like weird bullshit line about how ghosts react differently to black people, and it's like, whoa.
There are certain ghosts in the later stages of the psychophenomenal spectrum that react better to black people. And it's just like, whoa! I'm glad that's not in the movie.
But you know, there's a part of you that has to wonder: is this something that Aykroyd wrote and was like in the script, so that's why it's in the book? But then, of course, when they went to go make it into a movie, somebody on set was like, "You can't do this." Like,
I mean,
you know what I mean?
I don't doubt that actually.
Right.
I don't doubt that it wasn't written in, and just so that, I mean, Dan Aykroyd loves lengthy explanations, which is another reason why I believe that he's Harlan and not Richard of the two bums.
Yeah.
But I totally could get him being like, "Oh, you're black. That's awesome because like blah 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 science words."
Well, and one of the things that one of the big movies of his that like I adore, but man, in retrospect, is just one of the most problematic films in history, is Trading Places, right? I really do adore that movie for what it was trying to do at the time and the universe in which it existed at the time. But out of time, that movie is just like kind of horrendous in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, I mean that's been the discussion for a while.
Well, right, and that's a Dan Aykroyd, right? Like that is his blood runs through that movie, right? Like, and so knowing where he was as a writer then, it would not surprise me if this was his whole thing, was like trying to be this woke human at the time, being like, well, obviously we need to throw a little color into this, and then coming up with a reason that is just more problematic than just being like, we needed to hire a guy and this is the one that showed up. Like, why can't that just be the reason?
Right. There's also the fact that like Winston is a decorated soldier. Mm-hmm. It's not like he was a cook in the army.
Exactly.
He was
like having a guy that has some combat experience and on top of that knows how to follow an order is something that the other three just don't have, right? Like, oh man. And it, you know, and this ends up, as a character, this ends up lending itself to a lot of the issues that people have, and I think these are legitimate concerns with the 2016 version, right? And the way in which, what is her name?
Patty Jenkins.
Patty Jenkins?
That's the character's name.
No, sorry.
You were talking about Leslie.
I can't remember her last name.
Can't think of her last name, and that's awful right there. That we can't think of Leslie's last name.
But
Patty Jenkins is her character name.
Right. It's a lot of the same issues that they have with this character, and in some ways, like, they're trying so hard to emulate the idea of Winston Zeddemore and the ways in which he was kind of just this, he's supposed to be this working class guy that joins up with these super smart scientists that are doing it. So he's kind of the street attitude, which is a problematic statement in and of itself, that is brought to these bookworms, right? Like that is the whole point of his character in the story, really. And in the 2016 version, they try and do the same thing, and it just leads to the exact same problems. Is like you're casting this character, this person, in this way specifically because it reads in this way to you. Isn't that like the whole problematic point? Like, you can't do that. Yeah, man. So the reason that I haven't brought up Winston yet is because, like, part of me is also like, I don't know how to talk about Winston because there's no clean way to do it, right?
Oh yeah, no, you're not wrong. And what makes something even worse, one of the earlier comic adaptations says that each one of the Ghostbusters is required because they bring something important to the team. Peter is the mouth, Egon is the brains, Ray is the heart, and Winston is the soul. And that wasn't an issue for me until thinking about, how he is described in this book. Because I think of the soul as like, he represents, them being grounded and caring about other people in a way that the other three really don't.
Yeah, maybe a better term would be the conscience,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. The soul.
he's the human being out of the four of them. Like
Yes.
that's really what he brings to the table, right? Is like, yeah, it's a weird way in which it's handled in the movie, and it leads to just a weird way in which that character is then handled in every adaptation going forward. The novelizations, the 2016 version, the comics, like it just is it's a bad seed, man.
It is. It really is. But when I read that, and I'm just like, ooh, that's interesting, because like everyone else kind of got a blurb about who the character was and what they stood for when we were introduced to him. But that's the moment when we're told that Winston Zedmore is not white. In the novelization.
It's the first time that we are told that. Like, as somebody that has watched the movie 1,000 times, it didn't even occur to me. But you're totally right. Like, that is the moment where we realize that that character is not white. Man, I do have to say that, like, I think the books have shown me more than the movies ever did the relationship between him and Ray that I never really picked up on. You know what I mean? Like they become pretty close. Even in the first book, they're pretty close. Their discussion about, like, God and what everything is going on and what it could possibly mean. And then in the second one, I mean, it opens up with the two of them being the ones having to go to the birthday party to perform, right? Like, so I do really like that relationship a lot.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because it's a perfect segue to the Fort Detmers scene. Are you ready to talk about the Fort Detmers scene,
Yeah. Well, so okay. So it works its way into the movie in slightly. It's moved into the montage scene that we actually do weirdly get in the book, and I was actually curious how the book was going to handle the montage, because montages in books are always kind of awkward, but like the montage that we see in the movie is pretty necessary. I mean, it moves time forward, and it lets us know that they are kind of the Ghostbusters are doing gangbusters, right? Like that is how we learn that they are doing as good as they are. And so the book kind of just does it. So right, there's like a couple of moments that are just a paragraph, another moment that's a page and a half, another moment that's just 2 lines, another moment that's a paragraph. So it's like weird performative writing before, like in a way that I don't think he knew what I don't think Mueller knew he was doing performative writing, but like that's exactly what it is. And that scene is not there noticeably. And I thought, oh, okay, that was something that they just thought of in the movie, or maybe this guy wasn't comfortable writing it. I totally get it. Lo and behold, like not even 20 pages later, we actually get an expanded version of the ghost blowjob.
Right. Because also in the film version, in that montage, they do a lot to make it look like Ray is having a dream.
Yes, it is not actually happening. Ray is just getting into this weird place with ghosts. The end.
Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, he's fetishizing them because he's been fighting them, and I don't know, it's weird. But then, in the book, it for real happens.
Yep, it's not a dream at all. And also, like, goes on. Like, goes on much longer than the 30-second scene in the movie.
Yeah.
So Ray and Winston are out, and they're doing their thing on call for the night. Like, I guess Egon and Venkman have the night off or something. I don't know.
No, Venkman is going out with Dana to discuss the findings about Gozer. And Egon is just hanging out at the firehouse, but that's when Viz Clortho, Louis Tully, possessed by a terror dog, is dropped off at their doorstep. He's also kind of romancing Janine, which is a much bigger plot point in the book than it is in the film.
Egon trying to romance Janine?
Yes.
Yeah. In the film, it's very much leads to, like, it seems like Janine is just kind of infatuated with him, but Egon is just kind of checked out from the rest of the world, which totally makes sense for his character. In the book, there's this weird, and it's because we get the narration of what's going on in his head. So it's not that he does anything more than he does in the movie. It's that we get to learn a little bit more about, like, his reasons for what he does. And it's very, very weird, this, like, study of the human condition that he's using her for. Oh man, but yeah, so these two go off to go bust some ghosts at Fort Detmers, and Ray, who decides to completely strip down from his Ghostbusters uniform and put on an old army uniform.
Yeah, what the hell is that? Like, it's the last job of the night. I'm gonna dress like a soldier from colonial times.
There's this weird thing for me where like I have always thought about the Ghostbusters, and I thought this was always the point, so correct me if I'm wrong, but they're supposed to feel like pest control but for ghosts, right? Like they're supposed to be these guys that in New York they run pest control for ghosts. And so they're just these blue collar workers. And so it made me think of all of those like those stupid storylines about like the shitty plumber, right? Or the guy that comes over and uses the bathroom and doesn't flush, or the guy that comes over and goes through the panty drawer, right? It made me think of that, like he's turning into one of these like blue collar like pest control guys or plumbers or whatever that are coming in, and he starts like playing with the person's stuff, and it's like you're what's give blue collar workers a bad name, right? Like stop it.
You're not wrong. The original idea of Ghostbusters, before it like metastasized into the actual thing that we got, was just we're gonna follow exterminators, but they exterminate ghosts.
Right.
And they became scientists who were doing this manual labor once they like decided to write it up. And they're like, oh, let's show the origin. Let's not just act as if it's an accepted service in the world of New York.
Well, and it's important that it's not an accepted service, right? In both stories.
In both stories, yeah.
It's very important that they're kind of the only ones that can do it, right? Yeah.
So that's the whole thing. Like it grew to become that. But you're not wrong in feeling like they're just exterminators, but they exterminate a very special type of pest.
Oh, man.
But yeah, so he dresses in and then he lays down in an old bed, and he's like, oh, this is more comfortable than the beds of our time. And I'm like, there's no friggin' way a bed from the 1700s would be more comfortable than a modern day bed. Like,
that just doesn't, yeah. Yeah. Especially if it was literally from the 1700s. And so over the years, it's just kind of gotten like rotted and fallen in.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, no, this is like a museum of historic artifacts. Like, why would it have a real mattress at all if it were just a recreation? Like,
yeah, it's like the Hunt House. No, man, it's a weird scene. It's just a weird scene. So he lays back in full costume, and the ghost that they are supposed to be there to catch ends up giving him a blowjob. There's no way around that. And then we literally see the line where he decides, I'm not going to catch this one. Like, he's going to let this one go.
Yeah,
like,
maybe so I'll go some bad.
It's this weird power dynamic moment where, like, he suddenly is like, I am not going to assert my authority over this thing. And this also it also hit me really weird because we are also slowly learning more and more about, like, we learn more about the ghosts and like what happens to them when they're in the trap. Like there's all of this weird stuff about like hearing like the pain coming out of the containment unit, right? And being able to look in and I think I kind of like I do remember that they were able to use like the TV and stuff to see what was going on in there. But the way in which they talk about like Winston specifically having these real concerns about like what are we really doing to these souls that we are keeping in this unit here in the bottom of this basement in this shitty neighborhood in New York? Like, is this really what we're consigning these people to? And like that's a weird level of care and conscience to be putting into this story that was never there in the movies.
It might have been there in the script. Like I could see that as being an idea in the script, but if you're making a comedy, it's the first thing to go. Just like there's this great throwaway line in that montage section about the ACLU wanting to fight for the rights of the dead and deceased.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, this would have been an interesting little plot line to like follow.
Right. So to have that weird subplot, this idea that maybe ghosts are more than just vapor, right? Like the fact that they were something before and all that. And it definitely, is supported by a lot of what goes on in the rest of the movies, both of them. That scene with Ray is even worse.
No, that scene with Ray is weird. The even worse is later on during the Gozer montage, because there are two montage sections in it, and you have the bank people, the people who work in the bank, who it's 15 minutes to lunchtime.
Oh yes.
And their supervisor's like, we're going to work through lunch, but then a ghost sexually assaults her, and then more ghosts sexually assault everybody in there, and they all seem to enjoy it and seem to groove on it, but like it's fucking weird. It's fucking weird to think like this whole room of accountants just got ghost hand jobs.
Well, and so there's this there's there's that underlying story through both of them, right? The idea of the psychic energy and all of this. And like also we have the benefit of hindsight in a lot of ways, not least of which knowing where Dan Aykroyd now is and
Yes.
like his beliefs about the universe, right? And it does not really surprise me that there is, in addition to all of this stuff going on with pain and with anger, that he also would throw in some stuff about pleasure as well, right? Like there's this weird side to this whole thing that is like it, there's a psychoanalysis side to this story that is just not present in the movie that is like all over this book.
Yeah, yeah. That's a nice way of saying it. But again, I understand if we're trying to make a comedy in 1984, why Ivan Reitman's like, so I'm getting rid of this.
Yeah, and I mean like the first movie, is it PG? Does it even come out?
It's PG.
Because PG now. Is it PG because PG-13 doesn't exist yet, or is it PG despite PG-13 being an option?
Oof, that's a good question. I'm pretty sure it's PG-13 now. I know that a bunch of movies were like retroactively
Once
re-rated.
Because it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom that created PG-13, right?
Temple of Doom is what started that. So that's not until I believe a year
84?
after
85?
Ghostbusters. I think it's 85. I'm not. Don't quote me on that. It might be 84. But like Howard the Duck, right? Do I have my copy of Howard the Duck right here? I do. Talk, Sejan. Come.
Yeah. So I mean, but because
Howard the Duck is rated PG, right? And it came out in 1986.
Right.
So,
and thinking about the rest of what goes on in the movie, there's really no reason for it to not be Ghostbusters is still considered a PG film. So like there's also that whole element, right? Like in addition to them making it a comedy, they are kind of also making it like a family movie, and it does find its niche with the family thing. Now, I think a lot of what happens in the script for 2 is a kind of a reaction to them not expecting it to be as big of a quote unquote family hit as it became, which is what that whole like birthday scene is about, is a commentary on. But like, it's hard to, there's no way nobody was thinking about that, right? Like they were thinking, we're going to get this into theaters and we're going to make it so that you can bring the kids, like, and that's what makes it the success that it is.
Right. And the real Ghostbusters had come out and was a phenomenon as a cartoon. Again, also, I don't know if you've watched The Real Ghostbusters lately, but that series, they had planned for it to be more adult, but again, kids glommed onto that because of how toyetic it was.
Yeah,
I love
of course.
that word. I love that word so much. And yeah, so they're like, well, if we're doing another movie, we got to shoot to the kids. Kind of the same thing that happens between Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and TMNT 2, Secret of the Ooze.
For sure.
Like, it very much goes from an adult movie where Casey Jones straight kills the Shredder and goes, oops.
Yeah.
To them not fighting with their weapons in the second movie.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's a
weird time for cinema. Too. Yeah, like...
Yeah. Well, and especially if you're trying to make this kind of, like, this particular kind where it's this like sci-fi realism set in the modern world. You're not making a space opera. You're not making a fantasy world. Like this is supposed to be the real world, and these things are happening in it. And in a weird way, like you have two choices. You go hardcore and you make it like this like R type thing, or you dial it back and you make it this thing that you, like you said, you can sell toys with. And I mean, what is the company going to want you to do?
Yeah, they always want to think about marketing. Ever since Star Wars, first Star Wars, New Hope Star Wars, they've always thought about that marketing back end.
Yeah.
For any movie that might have universal appeal, right? Like you're not making, well, I mean, I was going to say you're not making something like Jaws, but Jurassic Park, like I have Jurassic Park toys from when I was a kid. They make no sense. Have you seen the Dennis Nedry action figure from Jurassic Park? Do yourself a favor. Do yourself a favor right now. Google Dennis Nedry action figure Jurassic Park, and just be like, "That's not Newman. That's not Newman." But nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Oh shit, man. Yeah, Ghostbusters though. I'm happy to be reading the book, and the books are, I don't know, I guess dirty in a way that the movie is. The movie tries to be, but it's much more like it's much more showy. It's much more of a movie, like the watching Bill Murray go from being this professor in the first scene to this guy in overalls with gunk on his face by the end of the movie. It's fun to watch. You know what I mean? Like the journey is really, really cool. In the book, actually seeing why he's doing what he's doing and where he's coming from and where he's trying to go, it's so much more of a deeper story, and it's so much more. It's more rich.
Right. So at the exact moment you sent me, they really hate Peter Venkman in this book, I had been crying over the scene where he's like thinking about when he told his father that he wanted to go to college. And all of that, because I'm like, this is deeper characterization for this character than I have ever experienced. I have never felt more for Peter Venkman than I do in this moment. And then because you're like, they really hate him in this, I tracked through, there's a real nice story arc for him. Like when they're at the Sedgwick and he's like, all right, we're done. I'm in charge right now. I'm going to give the orders. Because when all three of us are trying to do our own thing, we're destroying this hotel.
Yeah. Well, and part of that comes down to, I think, Mueller's not great writing, right? Where he does a lot more just telling rather than showing in his writing. And so there is a straight up definitive moment where he's like, all right, I'm growing up. Like, that
exactly.
Might as well have been the line that, like, he's like, all right, this is it. This is the moment where I'm becoming a man. And it's like, oh, okay, all right. And so you're not wrong. Like that journey for him is really, really enjoyable to read and to watch. It's just that he starts in this place, and this is totally a product of the time. I think that's also a huge part of this, is that like he starts in this place where he is just gross in those couple of opening scenes, and then he becomes a much more tolerable version of that by the end of the book. And so, like, I guess I don't want him to be that in the beginning because I want him to have a journey. But man, some of those opening scenes for him in that book are just gross.
But those opening scenes happen in the movie. At least one of them. The scene with the psychic cards and the shocking, like, I've never liked that scene.
Yeah.
Because
you're not wrong.
It's like, what are you doing? Like you're just trying to sleep with this girl who is a student at the university you teach at.
And I think the reason that it hits me even harder in the book is because he sits in that moment for pages. Like for everything else in that book that kind of moves along at a good click, like that scene goes on for a while in the book, it feels like. And part of that is because it was also the first few pages of the book I had read,
Yeah,
so So there's just you're not wrong that it's also gross in the movie, but that just proves my point.
Right. Well, because like you said about Egon and all this, you get that inner monologue for the character that you don't experience in a film. So you get Peter like, oh yeah, she's really buying this. Like, oh yeah, I'll tell her this, and and it's just like, like it was bad before when you were clearly telling this girl she was psychic so she might sleep with you, but now all of your actions are being spelled out to me.
Right.
And like,
and there's
you're
no
willing
remorse
to
in any of it.
not go to the library for the thing that will make you, like, give you purpose in life so that you might be able to sleep with this girl.
Yeah.
You nasty, Venkman. You nasty.
And like I said, a lot of it is like totally like product of its time, but that's not enough for me. Like, that doesn't forgive it. It's just, it's really, it hits you really weird. Like a lot of things in this story, it just kind of hits you really weird.
Right. But I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to read it, because I had heard that the novelization was not necessarily something special, but a different experience. And I will say, that did not disappoint. This was definitely a different experience.
Yeah, easy read too, man. Like, super easy read. I think I've been reading it for maybe like 20 minutes at a time, just because that's like where I am in my life right now. I can't really like dive into a book like I used to, but I still got through it in like 5 days. So
yeah, it's not like I read through it in a day each time that I read it. And it's just like, that was like 2, maybe 3 hours with other like distractions in the way of it.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, it's not bad, but also what I want to talk to you, just because we're here and we're talking about novelizations of Ghostbusters, I'd like to talk about the Lost Ghostbusters book, which it's not truly lost because I own a copy of it, but it's like worth $300. Like it might be one of the most like valuable pieces of pop culture ephemera I own. And it comes from...
Is it like a third story?
It's a third story, semi-influenced by the working ideas from the Never Happened third movie from the 90s, where the Ghostbusters go to hell, which was the working title for the third Ghostbusters movie before that went away. And I only know about this because this is one of my favorite stories from my time at URI, all right? We're going to get a little bit nostalgic right now, and I apologize for that. But I was working on, I want to say it was Dangerous Liaisons, or Les Liaisons Dangereuses, which is the title that we went with, even though it's just Dangerous Liaisons, right? Like, I don't know why we had to... I don't understand it sometimes, right? But no harm, no foul. I'm not upset about the fact that we called it Les Liaisons Dangereuses. It's just that's what we called it. And it's just, we ever just called it liaisons. This is not the important part of the story. But I'm working on that, and one of the assistant stage managers has a friend pick her up afterwards, and I'm cleaning up because I'm the head of the crew, the stagehand crew. And she's like, "Oh, Devin, you should meet my friend because he likes Ghostbusters a lot." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I'll talk to this guy. Whatever, right? It's college. I'm a freshman. I don't know what's going on." And we have this long, in-depth discussion about Ghostbusters. And he tells me, "Have you read the new book?" And I'm like, what new book? What are you talking about? There's a new Ghostbusters book? There's the comic where it set it in the 90s. That was weird. Have you ever read that? I can't even remember the name of it. Have you read that one where they set it in the 90s?
The Extreme Ghostbusters one that they did?
No, not the Extreme Ghostbusters. It's literally the story of Ghostbusters, but set in the 1990s. So like...
Why?
So that technology and stuff, I can't think of it. It was by 88 Miles Per Hour Studio. So it was a very independent label at the time. And maybe they released it. It's going into 2000. Like, so the Gozer event happens on the eve of the year 2000 instead of when it happens. It's very strange. But I also, it was one of the first things I ever pre-ordered on the internet was a collected volume of that. And it never came, and I was out $200 for that.
Gross.
And that's wicked gross. It's one of those gross stories. Never released, and my money's just gone. But this other book, right? He's like, "Yeah, you should get a copy of it." So I go online. I'm already once bitten, twice shy from the experience that happened with this Ghostbusters comic I can't remember the name of. And Ghostbusters Resurrection, I think it's called. I can confirm that for next episode. But I go and I buy it. And it's called Ghostbusters The Return, and it's by Shali Fisk. Fisch. And in it picks up 2 years after the events of Ghostbusters 2, and the big storyline is Peter Venkman is running for mayor.
That makes total sense, considering what we know in the first two movies and his relationship with the mayor in those. Yeah.
And, right, so this is my first time ever reading these characters. And the villain is Xanthador, and nice. Xanthador is the demon of fear. So what he does is he creates ghosts that are based on urban legends because, you know, that's based in like real fear, not the fear of ghosts, but like the fear that may have happened somewhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he builds up enough fear juice to like break through the veil, and they have to Ghostbust their way through it. But Dana is there, Oscar is there, a little bit grown up. So reading these books, I understood where Shali Fisk got a lot of his characterizations of the Ghostbusters, because there are straight sections lifted from the first book to describe characters. And
okay.
that was this very cool thing. Now, I found it's available online to just read. And this is a recommendation for Sejan or to anybody out there who may have had their interest piece hearing about these Ghostbusters novelizations. Definitely pick up the omnibus if you're interested. It's $10. Is very affordable, and you get 2 very interesting stories about the Ghostbusters if you're a fan. And like Sejan said, they're not hard reads. But then just type in Ghostbusters The Return PDF into Google, and you can find it in a very easy to read form. And it's so interesting that, like, before IDW got their hands on this property, and like that book was shelved and pushed away forever, and like copies of it, like there was only ever one printing of it in paperback, which is why it's such a rare, like, valuable book. I mean, I'm never going to sell it. Like, that's the thing about value, is that it's only worth that if I'm willing to sell it. And it's not. I like to have it in my little collection.
Yeah. Well, and so, like, is it acknowledged as, like, one of the alternate universes? Because that's one of the big things in the Ghostbusters universe now, right? Like, is they've acknowledged that there's, like, alternate universe Ghostbusters and stuff like that?
As far as I know, no. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I kind of fell off the IDW Ghostbuster train, I'll be honest with you. I missed one issue of the Mass Hysteria 12-part event, and I have been unable to find it. And I ordered a like new condition hardcover collection of it, and it fell apart in my hand, and I was unable to return it. Like new, like garbage is how it arrived. I have a real tenuous relationship with Ghostbuster fiction, come to find out. As we explore
the copy you
this.
sent me is real nice and pretty.
Yeah, no, the copy that I have from that is real nice. It's not as nice and pretty as it was when it arrived, because I've read it. Like, I might order another copy just to keep pristine, and then use this one to take, like, margin notes, because I'm the kind of person who would have margin notes in my copy of the Ghostbusters novel.
You know, you say that, but I cannot tell you how many times I wanted to take, like, a red pen or, like, a highlighter and just be like, I need to talk to somebody about this.
Well, like, there's this moment, your brother, when the Ghostbuster game came out last year, the re-release of it came out last year for PlayStation 4 and all the other systems, Dale and I would refer to Peter Venkman as Pete. And Zach's like, you're so familiar. Like, that sounds so strange that you call him Pete. But then, like, Ray calls him Pete, like, 3 times throughout the books. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I need to remember this, because it's not just something that Dale and I do. It comes from the fact that, like, Ray and Peter's friendship, that's why he calls him Pete. Mm-hmm. And it means something because everybody calls him Venkman. But it's how you know that they have a strong friendship.
Right.
And you understand why he is so willing to become friends with Winston once Peter goes off and is with Dana.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of Ghostbusters stuff, but The Return is also a very good read, and it feeds right in with everything of this. Especially, I really liked reading the first book, and Mayor Hisander, who is not the mayor in the movie at all. I don't... or the mayor in the second book, which is why it's very interesting when he's like, hey, it's the mayor, I know him. And it's like, you kind of don't, because it's a different name for the mayor.
Well, I kept trying to figure out if it was a play on His Honor, like...
Yeah, it was. It is. His Honor is definitely the joke in the first book.
Yeah, it's very bizarre.
But it's not Lenny. He never calls him Lenny in the first book. It's strange. But yeah, so he said... this guy would be dangerous if he ever decided to go into politics. And I feel like Shally Fish read that line and was like, oh, that'd be an interesting plot line for a third Ghostbusters story.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Shit. Ghostbusters.
It's such an interesting world if you actually, like, deep dive into it. And that's what these books allowed me to do more of.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a wild world because ghosts don't exist enough for people to buy it, right? But clearly these, like, huge world events happen in it. It's a very, very weird world.
Yeah, it's like, and I dig in the first book. It's explained better in the first book than the movie does it, where, like, because there's that proof that there's a ghost with the Sedgwick, like, cleanup, that everybody just decides, well, I was, like, just living with this fucking thing. But if these people aren't going to think I'm crazy if I tell them I have a ghost in their house, I'm going to call them up.
Right, right. And there's this idea that people have just been waiting to really open up about it. It's what kind of makes it a little hard when we get into the second one, when everybody's just like, oh, you're still full of shit. I get that there would definitely still be people like that. I mean, look at the world we live in currently. I'm not even going to talk about like the parallels there, but like the fact that everybody has gotten on the train of these guys must have just been full of shit is just like upsetting to me in some ways.
But I also kind of get it in the fact that they make no secret of the fact in the book or the movie that because they dealt with that Gozer was the reason why there were so many ghosts.
Right, right.
Gozer getting closer to the dimensional rift and there being so much ERM energy, the cosmic egg roll cracking. I love that. Like that's so Dan Aykroyd, that whole thing.
And the Twinkie later,
yeah.
right?
I mean, that's the Twinkie makes it in. But that's a big Twinkie. But yeah, it's it's something. But and then once that goes away, people have short memories. Like I've always had an issue in the Star Wars stuff with like, how do you forget the Jedi? In 18 years, they were basically the galactic police force. And then there were people like Han Solo was alive while there were Jedi. And then he's like, they're a myth. And it's like, how? How are they a myth to you? You were at least a child while Jedi freely roamed the galaxy.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. And one of the reasons why, after I had gotten the book and started reading a little bit, I wanted you to read it is because of how oddly it parallels the current situation we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. It's hard to focus on that sort of stuff right now with like being in the thick of it. Like have this conversation with me in 2 years.
Oh yeah,
you know
no,
what I mean?
that's completely understandable. I just never really considered how culturally relevant Ghostbusters may become.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the idea of paranoia and this thing, the unknown, the supernatural becoming natural, right? Like it's what all of this stuff is always based on, and it's what makes it such a good ghost story on top of being a funny like family comedy. Is it is also like really good horror for the 80s. Like it is actually like a really good scary story. So it succeeds on all fronts, which is what makes it such a successful franchise.
Yes, and I mean it speaks to something that we all have inside too. Like it's not just the two movies. It has been pretty much a phenomenon for the last 35 years in a lot of ways.
It's never gone away. It's never gone away.
Yeah.
2 successful kids TV shows, a successful line of comics. Clearly there's novelizations, right? Movies that are coming out and still coming out.
Hasbro's doing a new line of action figures. Mattel was doing action figures for years. Playmobil. It's a big deal. Ghostbusters has been a big deal for a while. And it was interesting to look at something from the time instead of the way that, like, it has been represented by other fans of the medium in modern times.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So I think that wraps up our deep dive into the Ghostbusters novelization. Anything else you'd like to talk about, Sajin?
I got me a PlayStation Pro. I did want to talk about some stuff with that, actually.
That's fine. We can talk about it. I got nothing but time.
Because we talked about the Stadia so much and about the kind of poor experience you had with that, I thought I should also mention that in addition to getting a Pro, I have for the last couple of months also been fully invested in PlayStation Now. And it has been really kind of cool. Kind of like the opposite of the experience you seem to have with Stadia. I feel like it's actually a really interesting, really well-built service that knows exactly what it wants to be and provides a lot of opportunities for people to do some things that they otherwise wouldn't get to do. For those who don't know, PlayStation Now is the PlayStation streaming service, and I'm kind of surprised that more people didn't really talk about it with all the Stadia stuff going on, that PlayStation has kind of had a really well-working, it's not mind-blowing. There's still a lot of things like you cannot get good quality if you're streaming. I mean, even if you have the best internet, you're just not going to have the best quality. If you're trying to do anything that is like precision based, good luck. Like there's definitely some issues when you're streaming there. However, they combat all of those issues by now giving you the option to download a lot of titles. So you're actually not even straight up streaming them anymore. Now you're just downloading them. So like there's there's something to their service that is pretty fucking spectacular, and I'm honestly surprised I didn't really hear more about it with all of the Stadia stuff over the last couple of years. Have you tried Now at all yet?
I haven't tried Now, and the big reason behind it was that for such a long time it was streaming only. So it was overshadowed by Xbox Game Pass, a service that has always allowed you to download the games as long as you were a part of it. It was never exclusively streaming, and Xbox Game Pass gave you access to like a huge amount of titles, where the PlayStation Now experience, in its infancy, was sort of reserved for PS1 and PS2 titles. Yeah. I know that it's been catching up with more PS4 stuff.
That's how I'm playing Spider-Man right now, and I'm gonna play Control that way, and like a whole bunch of stuff that is PS4. But yeah, you're not wrong. It has a limited library, especially when you're talking about PS4 titles and all that sort of stuff. But I'll be honest, I don't own an Xbox, so I you know what I mean. Like, so I just don't like Game Pass. Has never been anything that I've paid much attention to because I've never really been a big Xbox person.
I have a weird group of friends who are like Xbox warriors. And I'm like, I didn't know. I didn't realize. I thought that PS4 won this whole argument this time around. Like, I never really got it. I had an Xbox. I had an original Xbox. I bought it specifically to play as Spawn in Soul Calibur 2.
Nice.
I had convinced myself that the green gem on top would try to steal all of my information. So I covered it with a cup.
Okay, you should talk to somebody about that.
I called myself the Xbox Avenger because I was trying to come back for it. Oh, you know, high school Devin, right? Different Devin than the Devin you get every week on the Say Report. Let me tell you something.
You know, we had an Xbox in the house. Zach is the one that really brought the Xbox into my life. Like, he had the Xbox and the first Xbox 360 in my life with his as well. And I had an Xbox 360 because at some point you couldn't deny that, right? Like, everybody had to at least touch an Xbox 360 in their life. But like, when Kinect came out, I pretty quickly was just like, all right, this is not the company for me because like this is not going where I want it to go. And I kind of went into my PlayStation corner since then, and I haven't left since. So like I knew about the Xbox experience stuff, but like I think the argument I've always heard is, yes, they had such a wide variety of games and they were always downloadable, but they were Xbox games, so that didn't really matter to me. You know what I mean? Like,
right. But all I hear is these people like, oh, you gotta get on Game Pass, man. I'm playing this, I'm playing that, and I'm like, you know, that interests me, but I'd have to dump the $200 to get an Xbox. And that doesn't interest me. And I know that you can play it on a PC too. Like, they now have the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate that allows PC users too. Yeah, I know. I know that you can do it with the PlayStation as well.
PlayStation also allows that now, you know? It's the thing is that Xbox has definitely been leading the charge on that, and Microsoft has really been kind of pushing forward on that. The problem is that they've never had the content that I have personally cared about. I won't sit here and say that they don't have any content. That's ridiculous. They of course they do. But I think the last time I was interested in anything on Xbox was Sunset Overdrive, which I believe was a premier game for the Xbox One.
Dead Rising 3. I bought an Xbox One for Dead Rising 3 because I liked 2 so much, and then Dead Rising 3 was such a departure for that series because it was like open world and you're outside and you're driving trucks, like monster trucks, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, weird call on the Capcom Dead Rising series to do everything that it did with that, including becoming a not just a PlayStation exclusive at first. Oh, I guess they hadn't been before. They had been Xbox
it always
before,
been
right?
Xbox. Yeah, Dead Rising 2 was the first one to come out on a PlayStation, on a Sony system.
Right.
And then they did that with Off the Record, and then they're like, and now we're taking it back. And it's like, that was clever. That was a clever marketing thing, and it worked for me. It's why I owned an Xbox One for a little bit. But then that game, you know, Andy Lawrence can voice as many main characters as you want, but if the game's not as enjoyable as the one that came before it, I'm gonna get bored.
Yeah, man. So I guess, but that's just the thing, right? Is like with all the Stadia stuff that was going on, not hearing more about these other streaming services and kind of how well they were already kind of doing is surprising to me. I mean, I don't know what went wrong for Google, and I don't think that it necessarily went completely wrong. because like I've always stood by the fact that they weren't doing it to be the best in the field. They were doing it to collect data, and now they have that data. So congratulations, Google played us all, right? Like, so like I don't think that they necessarily consider what they did a quote unquote failure, but it's surprising that in the landscape that currently exists in games, what they did made such a big splash, I guess.
I mean, I think the big issue for me, as someone who got Stadia from the start, is that they sold me a beta but didn't call it a beta.
Hmm.
I still have a lot of issue with the fact that I have a controller that is Bluetooth like ready and able, but on the firmware side, it is still blocked off. I can't use it as a Bluetooth controller, even though it has that capability inside of it.
That's weird.
Its
That's
machinery would allow for it, but no, you can't do that.
It's like on disc DLC. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You built it into the thing. Unlock that shit for the people that bought it. It's that weird thing in software where they're like, you're not buying the product, you're buying the license to use the product, and it's just like, okay, like,
Right.
like,
And the
fuck
fact that
you.
I bought like a hard thing, a thing that I can hold in my hand, a tangible thing, and they're like certain features of that tangible thing, even though we sold it to you on the back of those, are still not available to you. It's like, well, I don't really want to invest in your service, Google,
Yeah, yeah.
because what?
Yeah, but man, PlayStation Now has been a fucking blast.
That's cool.
There's 3 or 4 games. I found a ton of adventure games on there. I'm playing Sam and Max again. There's some good silly shit on there. Totally worth the $14 a month or something. Even if you only do it for a couple of months. Like that's the other thing is when I first did it, I was like, I'm gonna try it for a month and see how I feel. You get 7 days free as it is, and like so I'm just give it a shot. And if I don't like it, you can cancel it because it's a month-to-month service. I still haven't canceled it. You know, I've been doing it for about 2 months now. I've paid. I got my 7 free days, and then I paid for a month, and I just paid for another one. So like, I'm gonna keep going with it. We got Overcooked 2. Oh man, you can download Overcooked 2. So like, if you guys want to get in on that shit, I fucking love that game. It's been a blast. It's been real cool.
Yeah. I think the reason why I bring up Xbox Game Pass is because Streets of Rage 4 comes out this week, and it's free with Game Pass. I mean, free with Game Pass. It's included in Game Pass because you have to be paying the $9.99 a month to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, do I want to buy the game for however much it's going to cost, or do I just want to? I still have an Xbox One here. Dale got gifted one as a severance from GameStop, and like it just sits in the corner. It doesn't get used.
Yeah, yeah. But drop $10 and play the
And
game,
I can
right?
play the game that I'm
and that's how
kind
they
of
get you.
iffy about, and it's just I don't know because I am kind of iffy about it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm excited for more Streets of Rage, but to get excited for that, I've played through the other ones,
Hmm.
and there's a level of difficulty in the Streets of Rage games that I forgot about. That I'm not
Is it
super.
pleasing? No, not
No,
super
it's
excited
not. It's
about.
not.
Yeah.
It's not pleasing. It's I don't know. It's like it's not balanced well, and like difficulty comes more from the waves and waves of enemies all at the same time, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, oh, this enemy is stronger. It's like, yeah, they're stronger. Also, there's 8 of them on the screen right now.
Fuck that noise. Yeah, I totally get that. Speaking of difficulty, I texted you about how I was just not enjoying Spider-Man. And you know, I had it knocked up to like the high difficulty, and I was trying to like really prove my worth with it. And I was just like, you know what? And I think what got me was Zach saying you cannot treat this like a Batman game as much as it is as much as it is birthed from that from that genre of fighting and superhero machinations and all that shit. You need to just not think about it like a Batman game. And I thought, well, if that's the case, then I got to go back to square one. So I just knocked it down to friendly, and like it's been so much more enjoyable. That and I downloaded it as opposed to streamed it, you know, and so I'm on my PS4 Pro. I've got my HDR like kicked up on my nice 4K TV, and I'm now down to a difficulty level that is much more my speed, and it's been a much more enjoyable experience.
Good. I'm glad to hear it because it's a good story, and it was disappointing that like you were letting the mechanics keep you from experiencing it.
Well, then it was exactly that, right? It was like is that realization, and all credit to Zach for being like, don't do that. Like I enjoy the Arkham games because the mechanics are so good. The stories also are phenomenal, but fuck me, playing those Arkham games just feels so good. I have to get to that point, and I forgot that it took me years to get to that point with Batman, right? Like when Arkham Knight finally came out, I did start on the highest difficulty and ran with it, but that's because I had played 3 other Arkham games before that. 4 if you count the fucking weird like side-scrolly Blackgate one that I also played through like a couple of times. So like there's this weird there's this build that I forgot about that I just needed to take into account with this.
Good. I'm glad. I guess one other thing, since we're talking about games, we hooked up the Wii and had a bowling tournament on Saturday.
Hey, quarantine fun, man. That's awesome.
It was a good time, and I think that's going to become part of it. We don't have a wrist strap, though, so I was nervous the whole time. But we got some wrist straps coming in the mail.
Nice.
We're going to fix that up real nice. And I think that Wii is going to become part of how we deal with this whole thing. But it brought me back to 2006 and the day that I got the Wii. And then you and I drove up to Rentham and bought the Mega Man figures from Jazzwares.
Oh, man, yeah.
Because I was trying to think of how old my Wii was. And then 14 years. That's right. That's crazy that I've had you for 14 years.
Man.
Yeah. All right. So any further things before we send it over to Will?
No, man. I mean, everybody stay safe. Everybody stay healthy. I know things are going to be opening back up in the coming week. Decide for yourself what you want to do with that. That's been our motto all along. Is just stay educated, stay smart.
Yep. And in regards to that, remember, we have a very special episode focusing on Dracula 2000. You'll get to hear that on Thursday. And if you have any questions about that movie, send it to us at The Stay Report on Twitter or email thestayreport@gmail.com. And we will do our damnedest to answer those questions. Because
yes, please
I'm
send them
I want to hear. I just want something crazy because it's a movie that I have thoughts about, but I'd really like to answer your questions too.
Yes, it invites questions.
That's all it does, is invite questions. Every time I watch it, I have a new question. But until next time, if you'd like to get in touch with Sejin and talk more about PlayStation Now and other streaming services, you can find him on Twitter at Siege vs. the World.
Yeah, and if you want to hit Dev up with any other weird Ghostbusters novelizations or any movie novelizations, you can find him at Devin D. Decker.
I will read them. Spoilers, I have the novelization of Answer the Call on its way to me right now.
Oh, man. I'm excited to hear about that.
So until that time, William, please take us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.